Hello out there, fellow Springsteen fans, Backstreets.com readers and viewers. I am Sean Poole, one of Backstreets.com's contributing writers, and I hope you and yours remain healthy and safe during all this ongoing craziness. Joining me online today for what I'm sure will be a very interesting conversation is New Jersey-based film critic Caroline Madden, whose book, Springsteen as Soundtrack, The Sound of the Boss in Film and Television, was published earlier this year by McFarland and Company Incorporated and is available now in signed copy form from Backstreet Records, the online shop at backstreets.com. We'll tell you a bit later in this conversation how you can purchase your own signed copy of this very insightful and entertaining book, if you haven't done so already. Carolyn, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. So if you're like me, you've probably seen some of these films that Carolyn includes in her book, but you may not have seen all of them. I know I haven't, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of them after having read what Carolyn's written and after having this conversation with her. So Carolyn, why don't we start with just sort of a general overview of the approach you took to Bruce's music and film and television series soundtracks, and then we'll dive right into examining each particular film that you cover or television series that you cover.
Yeah, sure. Well, starting off, before I even began writing or researching this project, I was looking on Bruce's IMDb page just to see what films and TV shows that his music was a part of. And I saw that he was in over 200 movies and TV shows. So that's a lot. And I could have approached this book in a different way and sort of done an overview, a brief overview of the majority of movies or TV shows that he's been a part of. But what I wanted to do was a deeper dive into how his music changes a film or changes the makeup of a television show, how the themes of his work relate to the characters, how his music sets the time period or voices what characters are thinking and feeling. And I thought it would be more interesting if I took a deeper dive into particular films and TV shows. So that's why I only write about 13. But I do a close analysis of how each song functions in the film. And then I sort of widen the scope to how Bruce as a whole, as an artist, or the wider themes of his work, how they sort of intersect with the story that's being told on screen.
Okay. So the first film you cover is Baby It's You.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we start? Let's talk about Baby It's You.
Yeah. For me, I think Baby It's You is probably the best example of a film that uses Bruce's music, because it really feels like a Bruce song come to life. It's got that whole, Born to Run New Jersey environment, teenagers drag racing in their cars, young love, wanting to escape their hometown. It literally is like Thunder Road or Born to Run come to life. And that's what's so exciting to me about the film. What I found interesting watching the film a few times, I realized that it uses Bruce's music chronologically. So there's songs from the album Greetings and ending with songs from Darkness. And the film is about these high school characters who they fall in love, but when the school year ends, the girl goes to college and the boy moves to Florida. So it's got that, young love, and there's also like class differences because the girl is from upper class and he's from lower class. So anyway, there's this sort of divide within the film. There's two halves of the film between, their youth and then them facing their adult realities. And I found that this split is reflected in the use of Springsteen's music. So the first half of the film uses songs from Greetings up until Born to Run. And all these songs like E Street Shuffle, She's the One, they sort of reflect their sort of like carefree spirit. And then Sales uses Adam Raised a Cain during the second half of the film, which is when they sort of start to face up to their adult responsibilities and the reality that their love is probably not going to last.
Right. And this was one of John Sayles' one of his best films, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good film. You've got Rosanna Arquette, Vincent Spano, two great actors in the leads.
Mm-hmm.
Shot in New Jersey, Sayles from New Jersey. He's got, a lot of attention to detail that I think fans will appreciate. And you got to interview John Sayles for your book. Did you?
I did.
What did he have to tell you about Baby It's You in particular?
I asked him. He talked a lot about actually like the process of like getting music, because I was curious as to how he sort of thought of asking Bruce in the first place, So he had a lot of interesting stories about like the behind the scenes, like how he edited the shots to the music and things like that. He also talked to me a lot about the music videos that he shot for Bruce, which was interesting. But yeah, for him, he felt that Bruce's music had this sort of like youthful but also tragic quality that is reflected in the lovers storyline. And I really thought that was interesting, and that's what I love about the film, that I just love that sort of divide between the youth and adult and how that comes together. And I think Bruce's music really reflects that transition so like poignantly.
Yeah. And this, if I'm correct, and I'm sure this was probably the first major film to get approval from Bruce for using his music in a soundtrack. I know there was the film that came out of Israel that used Point Blank. And I'm sorry, what was the name of that film? I can't remember now.
Yeah, Dead End Street uses a few. It uses Point Blank, Hungry Heart, and Jungle Land. So that was like the very first.
Right.
But yeah, like this is Baby It's You is kind of the first like American
major studio production. Yeah,
exactly.
Go to your local multiplex and hear Bruce on screen for the first time.
Yeah, and that's what John was saying, that, at the time, like, he was able to get the songs, it wasn't that expensive. So he really lucked out.
Yeah, and as you noted, I mean, it kind of began a relationship with them. He later went on to direct several key Born in the USA era videos with Bruce. And later on, of course, the film Limbo, another one of John Sayles' great films, got to use a totally original Springsteen composition. Like we hadn't heard it yet before for that film, which was Lift Me Up. Beautiful song.
Love that song.
Yeah. Okay, so, and by the way, folks, everything we're talking about today, almost everything, is available in some way or another via streaming. I thought we had two that weren't available. We actually only have one. We'll talk more about streaming abilities later, but the next one up is one that, as far as I know, is not available anywhere for streaming right now. But you can get it relatively cheaply as a DVD You may even be able to check it out from your local libraries. It was released in a director's cut as a DVD. But let's dive right into Mask, Peter Bogdanovich's, I think, 1985 film. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think this was definitely this film is a great like case study or example of why Bruce's music works, because originally Bruce's music wasn't in the film. Peter Bogdanovich wanted Bruce because, well, the film is about a young boy with severe like facial deformities or facial differences. And Cher plays his mother. She's kind of like a rough and tumble like biker chick. And it's just sort of a coming of age story about him like getting a crush on a girl for the first time and dealing with high school. And it's based on a true story. So the real Rocky Dennis apparently was a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and Peter Bogdanovich was a big Bruce Springsteen fan as well. So he naturally wanted to use Bruce's music. But Universal Studios at the time, they were sort of warning him that there would be a lot of contractual issues. Something to do with like the video rights, they would be too expensive or something like that. So what ended up happening was Peter Bogdanovich, had edited the film with Bruce's music, and then he like went on vacation. And while he was on vacation, they added Bob Seger's music instead. So they ended up releasing a completely different film, and he was unhappy with it for many years until in 2004 when the director's cut DVD came out. That, and Peter Bogdanovich in interviews, and which you can read in my book, he talks about how Bruce's music was just an indelible part of his story, and without it, it wasn't the film that he sought out to make. And it's not that, the Bob Seger music is good, but there's just, you don't feel that connection. And that's what I explain about in the book.
Yeah. I remember seeing the movie in theaters when it came out. And I think at that time, we may not have even known a lot about this. It was kind of like kept quiet, the whole behind the scenes stuff about Bruce's music. But and I remember noticing a poster of Bruce in like Bruce and Clarence in concert. There's a poster in Rocky's room. So, that kind of stood out for me as a Springsteen fan then. But I wasn't aware for a while that, the original intent was to use Bruce's music, and that Bogdanovich was happy with it. And like you said, when you see it in its originally released form, which I guess you can't anymore. But the Seeger music did work well. I mean, it was emotionally appropriate, but it makes sense, and it is appropriate since Rocky Dennis was a Bruce fan, that music is used in the film. I'm glad it was able to finally be restored, and it works at least as well as Seeger's music did in terms of punctuating the scenes emotionally and all that.
I agree.
If I remember correctly, video and film rights were kind of tricky. I guess it's gotten a little easier now because most people anticipate that a film is going to be released on so many platforms. But then, back then, it still was kind of a new thing that, it was going to come to home video, it was going to be on cable, and it used to be, just movie and TV is all you had to negotiate. But all these new avenues sort of created, well, wait a minute, you got to negotiate all these other things. And oddly enough, I think I remember that happening with Baby It's You as well, not with Bruce's music. But there were a couple scenes that I remember watching it in one form, like on home video, and then I would see it on cable, and like I think the racing scene or whatever would have different music.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And that was one of the first exposures to, okay, when you license something, you don't necessarily get it.
I know. And it's that kind of stuff that like really shows you how a song can transform a film, like, and how it, you know, motivates the story or like comments on the emotions of characters. And like I agree, like I do enjoy the Bob Seger version. I like him as an artist, but I think the whole the whole thing behind Rocky's, the young boy's characterization, is that he continuously like perseveres, like past, you know, being made fun of at school, you know, he approaching, you know, his health issues with, you know, humor and just grace. Like these sort of spiritual elements are found in the songs that bookmark Mask, Badlands and The Promised Land. Like that's all about just overcoming, you know, your troubles and your doubts. And that's why, you know, Springsteen's music is so poignant in that film. It's, yeah, I highly recommend Mask if anyone hasn't seen it.
Yeah, me too. All right, next up is In Country. And this is one of the films I'm ashamed to say I still haven't seen. It's one of those things that it's always on my to-see list, to watch list, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But tell us about In Country.
Yeah, it's based off a book, like a young adult book, and it's about a girl in I think it's 1985, or it may even be 1984. So Born in USA has come out, and she, you know, is a Springsteen fan. And this young girl, her father died in Vietnam, and then she lives with her uncle, who was also in Vietnam. And she's just sort of, it's another coming of age story, and she's sort of witnessing how the men in her community are dealing with, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder and all these, you know, wartime memories. And but also she tries to get her uncle to like talk to her about what happened in the war, and he won't talk about it. So it's sort of her struggle to, you know, understand the past, and then how, you know, her community is going to reconcile with the war. And yeah, it's very moving. It's a really good film.
Yeah, and I know the novel has been praised, which I do remember reading at least part of it. Bobby Ann Mason, right?
Yeah.
And but I've just never gotten to see the film adaptation. Bruce Willis plays the uncle, right?
Yeah.
And who's the lead? Emily
Lloyd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who actually is an English actor, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you've seen it. Does she do a good job pulling off?
Yeah, like
role?
a lot of, like, I've read some criticisms about her performance, but I don't know. There's something that I really like about it. Like, she has this, I don't want to say innocence, but I'm not sure of the word, but there's just this really like sweet quality to her performance where it's like I at least emotionally connected with her. You know, she wanting to, you know, feeling like an outsider and wanting to learn more about, you know, what is affecting her family so much. It's not as explicit in the film as it is in the book. There's a lot more references to Bruce, but you know, I'm on Fire plays a lot.
Okay.
So that's the song that, but you know, you can still sort of draw these connections. Like she connects to Bruce because he, you know, he's singing about, in Born in the USA, he's singing about the men like her uncle. You know, she lives in this small town that's also been so affected by the war. And yeah, and that's why she connects to Bruce. Yeah.
What other of his songs are in it besides I'm on Fire? I presume at least one of his Vietnam War focus songs, or not?
You know, no. I think it's just I'm on Fire. But you see like his posters. They move up the timeline, so they move it to when the film was made in 1989, which like I think it's more poignant, you know, to have it happen when Born in the USA just came out, because you know the thematic connections between that are there. Yeah. But I think you can still infer, you know, her fascination with Bruce, you know, plays into her fascination with Vietnam.
Well, I'm looking forward to checking it out. And, you know, like I noted at the beginning, the whole idea behind this is to let folks know about your book and some of the films that they may have missed before that are covered in it. And, you know, using your book and this video, I think, can be a great supplement to streaming these movies, learning more about them, and seeing how Bruce's music becomes part of the artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
All right. So
definitely.
Next up, we have a film near and dear to my heart, of course, being a Philly boy myself, Philadelphia.
Nice.
And of course, Bruce won his first Academy Award for that. To date, his only one, but he's still got time.
Yeah.
You never know with Bruce. He certainly has been nominated again, as we know. But yeah, let's talk about Philadelphia. Great film.
Yeah, Philadelphia is it's just a monumental like piece of cinema. I think what's important to know about Philadelphia is like the time that it was made in. You know, at the time there was a lot of prejudice against those who had AIDS, particularly those within the LGBTQ community. And Jonathan Demme wanted to make this film, quote, for the malls. So he was seeking out a wide audience. He wanted to reach and touch the hearts of people that, you know, were conservative, that were even homophobic. And I think that's very admirable. So that's why someone like Tom Hanks was cast in this role, because it's, you know, he's like the, you know, ultimate like American hero figure.
Very likable, bankable star.
Yeah. Exactly. Like he played Mr. Rogers. Like, so, and part of that is why Jonathan Demme wanted to include Bruce. He wanted Bruce to, you know, rein those, you know, kind of, I guess, macho, masculine, you know, guys. So yeah, but Bruce, and actually, Jonathan Demme wanted like a Neil Young-esque sound, like Southern Man kind of song, but then Bruce turns out this beautiful like elegy, and it's such a beautiful song. And what's important about the song is like the use of first person, and it's putting you in the shoes of Andrew's character. And the song opens the film. So immediately through Bruce's music, you are like put in the shoes of someone who's suffering from this illness. And, you know, that's very powerful. Yeah, it's just a very significant film. And Bruce, you know, it's important that Bruce was a part of it, because he was able to really publicize his support and love for the gay community.
Absolutely. And this is the first time that Bruce has ever been asked, or it marked the first time that Bruce was ever asked to write a song specifically for, well, I'm sure he was asked plenty of times before. It's the first time he agreed to do it. And I think, you know, it might be good to mention at this time something that came out in your interview with John Landau is how often Bruce gets approached for film projects, and was approached like from the moment he became, you know, a big star, so to speak. So we're talking like maybe from 75 forward. He has received numerous offers for film roles, to participate in films, write music for films. Maybe you want to talk a bit about that, what Landau told you about I believe he
Yeah.
said Bruce reviews everything, which I guess shouldn't shock us too much.
Yeah.
How much control he has over his career. But why don't you tell us a bit about that right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, like, well, I will say that, now when Bruce was starting out, he definitely was extremely, careful about what films he would want to be a part of. And that's partially why I wanted to only write about a few films, because I wanted to be as selective as Bruce is. And I wanted to show you that Bruce, his art means so much to him. He's not just going to put it in anything. Like, he's participating in projects that are near and dear to the things that he cares about and the things that he explores in his music. But yeah, Landau said that, yeah, Bruce, he reviews the scripts, and if he likes something, he'll approve it. But if not, he's not shy about, not wanting to be a part of that. And I really admire that, that I think, Bruce stands by his art, and he wants it to be a part of projects that he cares about.
Definitely. All right. And we go from the first film that Bruce contributed an original song to the soundtrack to another film that came out just a few years later that he also contributed an original song to the soundtrack for, and that's Dead Man Walking, Sean Penn's film. Sean Penn,
Susan
acting in
Sarandon.
it, and Susan Sarandon,
Yes.
playing Sister Helen Prejean, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. So tell us about Dead Man Walking.
Yeah, Dead Man Walking is it's directed by the actor Tim Robbins, and it is a very empathetic portrayal of what it's like to be on the death penalty. And when writing about this film, I explore how the song relates very closely to the film, because it sort of recreates the scene where Sean Penn's character Matthew, does kill someone. So you're getting those images, and you're getting the sense of what it's like to be, confined in prison and waiting for your death. I also discuss Dead Man Walking is a very, as I said, like, it's an empathetic look at death row and being in jail. And I talk about Springsteen's other, like, criminal characters that he sings about in, on Nebraska, or The Ghost of Tom Joad, and how Springsteen, he's never judging anyone, but he's putting you in the shoes of someone who has committed something terrible. But Bruce and Dead Man Walking, they let you in on what, is going on with them psychologically, and understanding that we're all human and we're all capable of both good and bad things. I also discussed, since, the Susan Sarandon is a nun, and she's helping Matthew, confess his sins so he can go to heaven. I also discussed Bruce's perspective on religion and how it sort of relates to Sister Helen, because Sister Helen is kind of like, she's like a progressive nun, and how she sort of approaches the idea of sin is, she is different than the, like, fire and brimstone type of, religious perspective that Bruce grew up with. So I sort of draw the parallels between Bruce's sense of religion and Sister Helen. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I explore in that chapter.
Yeah, and it's a very, very complex film.
It is.
I mean, it's obviously based on Sister Helen Prejean's writings, and she is adamantly opposed to the death penalty. But what's interesting about the film is I would not call it something like preachy.
Yeah.
It very much takes in a lot of different perspectives,
Mhm.
and it's obviously a very interesting and engaging story, no matter what your perspective on the death penalty. And it makes you think, rethink your own views throughout it. So it's definitely that kind of film.
I
Um,
agree.
yep.
I especially like during his actual death scene, you're presented with the crime he's committed. So it's like it definitely makes you think long and hard about the death penalty and just our criminal justice system, because you're presented with this image of someone's life being taken, but yes, they did take someone else's life, and it it presents those difficult questions to you. But it's a phenomenal film. Highly recommend
Yeah.
it.
And Bruce's song, which also was nominated for an Academy Award, did not win it. But like Philadelphia, or like Streets of Philadelphia, it's written in that first person style that you mentioned before, written in the voice of the main character, or one of the main characters of the film. And it doesn't leave any pat resolution. It leaves things open, like a lot of his best songs do, and just kind of let you walk in the shoes of a person for a while, and let that kind of sink in, and just influence your own thoughts. Yeah,
exactly.
All right, so the next film is No Looking Back. This is another movie I have not yet seen, and at first I thought it was not available for streaming, but I did find that there is a library service that has it.
Canopy?
It's not Canopy. You know what? There's an app on my phone that I added called Just Watch. Have you ever
Nice.
that? And
Yeah.
it basically, you can type in the title of a film, and it'll tell you what streaming apps have it, if any. So give me a sec. It's loading up here. Hoopla. You familiar with that?
I am.
So Hoopla, from what I understand, is something you can sign up with through your library. It lets you borrow, I guess, streaming capabilities temporarily for a film. You can watch No Looking Back that way.
Awesome.
If you want to try to get it as a DVD, you've got to cough up some bucks. It is like a collector's item now.
It is. I bought it in like a 3-disc. I bought like a 3-disc.
Yeah, that's the one I saw.
Thing.
Yeah, Edward Burns, like 3 movies together, and even that was like, it was close to $100, I think.
Oh my God, I think I got it for like 40, but yeah,
good on you.
It's crazy.
So yeah, let's talk about No Looking Back.
It's such a shame that it's not as widely available and as widely seen, because I just find it to be an absolutely wonderful film. So Edward Burns is like a big Springsteen fan. He has another film called She's the One, and he has a lot of his films have like Springsteen references or Springsteen songs. He said that this film in particular was kind of inspired by the song Iceman, but I also see a lot of inspiration from like Thunder Road and Born to Run. The movie is essentially what would happen if Mary didn't get in the car, she stayed behind in her hometown, and then the driver came back years later to try and get her again. That's pretty much what the film is. And it's really, I don't know. There's something about it that I really love. Edward Burns wanted to film it like in Asbury, but it was too expensive. So a lot of it's filmed in Rockaway. But it has that, shore town feeling. So it's about this girl, Claudia. She lives, in her hometown. She's a waitress in their hometown, and her boyfriend Charlie, they were going to run away together, but she didn't go with him. So he did, but he eventually comes back because he realizes that his life out in the sun isn't what he thought it would be. So again, we sort of have this. It reflects sort of the transition from the Born to Run album to Darkness on the Edge of Town. You have, the idealism of youth being squashed by the realities of adulthood. Edward Burns uses a lot of Tunnel of Love songs because this is a romance, and the songs fit really well. He also uses a lot of Patty's music, which is really nice to hear. Like Rumble Doll is in there. It ends on her song that I think wasn't released. It's called I'm a Big Girl Now. It's really good.
That's the one that they just debuted on her show, right? With Bruce?
Yeah, but it sounds different. I think this was like a demo. But
that's another good reason to check it out, to hear
exactly
Patty unreleased track.
Exactly, an earlier version, and it's really nice. So yeah, and John Bon Jovi is in it. He plays Claudia's fiance.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot in there, and it's got that like small town struggle. It's very clearly influenced by Bruce, not just on the soundtrack, but within the text itself. Okay. I highly recommend it.
All right, so I have to see if I can get a Hoopla account going.
Yeah.
Or cough up some butts for the collector's item DVD. Either way. Or hope and pray that it'll be back on cable sometime soon. We'll see.
I know.
All right. So now we are switching from films to television, to groundbreaking television. The Sopranos. Yeah.
Oh, man. There's so much to say. Yeah. So State Trooper is at the end, the season finale of season 1. Mm-hmm. And what I did was sort of I pretty much only concentrated on the first season. Just, seeing how the song, played into the arc of the first season. So I discussed the album Nebraska, and the subtext of State Trooper, this like emotional, paranoia and like longing, how that sort of relates to Tony's like depression, the things that have been bothering Tony his whole life, with his mother and just his childhood. Mm-hmm. And then relating that feeling of like being on the run, that unsettled feeling that the song gives off, that's seen in the entire first season and the rest of the series. Tony's he's torn between his dual selves, wanting to be this family man, but also, his responsibilities as a crime boss. So I discussed that, and I also discussed how the finale of season 1, which is in that restaurant, and like a storm starts to happen, and he's surrounded with his family, how that mirrors the finale of the show.
Right.
Yeah. And I also talk about, David Chase. Soundtrack to him is very important. So there is meaning in every song. So that was even more reason to interpret how and why State Trooper is used. And lastly, I also discussed the Asbury Park episode. Mm-hmm. So just the use of, then it was, pretty much abandoned. And then in the winter, how that sort of is a manifestation of Tony's own like, loneliness and subconscious and things like that. But yeah, it's a great finale song especially for season 1, because it just gives you this like eerie sense of what's going to happen to Tony and for the rest of the series.
Right, it works very well. I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And the Asbury Park episode, was that part of season 1 as well? Or
that was not.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the only time besides the finale, that I looked at anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, there's also, I mean, it's no secret that David Chase is a Springsteen fan. And even though State Trooper is the only Springsteen track that he ever used throughout the show, right?
The only Springsteen track, but not the only like reference. Like,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Christopher actually making the Born to Run reference at one point.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. Just a little spot there.
Yeah, and Tony tells the FBI people that he just got the new tracks box set in one other episode.
I forgot about that one. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So next up is High Fidelity, which is a very interesting choice because I guess we could say it has some Springsteen music in the soundtrack, but it also has the man himself in the film.
Yeah, exactly. You can't not talk about High Fidelity. Yeah, it has. So the river does play, but more importantly, Bruce has a cameo, and he's sort of like this. I think I say in my book, like a fairy godmother or like guardian angel type figure for the main character, Rob. And he's giving Rob, this relationship advice that, he ought to call this girl up and see her. And
I guess just to be clear, for those who haven't seen it, this is all in Rob's head.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, that's the funny thing.
Mental projection or whatever. It is not, Bruce isn't an actual supernatural figure of any type in this film.
Exactly. Like, Rob is very, well, that's sort of like what I go into. Like, this film is very much like in Rob's head, and it's all sort of Rob's ideas of Bruce and of music and pop culture. What I do is I delve into, I guess, the like gender politics of the film, and masculinity, like sort of Rob's journey from like not wanting to being afraid of commitment and like being afraid of commitment and being afraid of like being vulnerable and just wanting to hold on to like really kind of hyper masculine ideas. I explore like how masculinity changes in Bruce's music. At the end of the film, Rob learns like I need to open up, I need to stop like pursuing the fantasy of like a perfect woman, and I need to just accept like find the beauty in the flaws of reality. And we find that in so much of Bruce's music. Even like songs on Human Touch, like Real Man, like it's about not, beating on your chest and like presenting that macho image, but, being open to like sensitivity and, equal relationship. So that's sort of what I explore in this chapter. And yeah, like Rob's journey, Rob's arc, very much parallels what we learn about Bruce in his memoirs, and his sort of journey from maybe kind of like sexist or isolationist behaviors into a loving family relationship. So I found it really interesting to watch and interesting to write. Yeah, and there's lots of other stuff in there too, in terms of like, being a fan of music and as I said, like the sort of perfect image that can represent, like in songs such as like Be True and Mary Lou. Like those girls are just like Rob. They're looking at films and books and movies and music and like just wanting the fantasy and being afraid of reality. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot there, a lot of cool connections that I enjoyed writing about.
So there you go, folks. You're going to want to see the film if you haven't. You're going to want to hear what Caroline just said here, and also check out her chapter on that. That was the whole idea of kind of gelling all this together. So that's great. Yeah. Next up is another film that I am looking forward to seeing, haven't seen yet, PROZAC Nation. And I think this is one of your most interesting chapters as well in the book. So tell us about this film and the book from which it derives. And
so the book PROZAC Nation is a memoir. I think it's it may be from 2001, or the film is from 2001. And it's a memoir of a girl from New York who is dealing with, severe depression, drug addiction, and she was one of the first to be put on Prozac. And she includes a lot of Springsteen references in the book. She connects to Bruce because she feels like, since she came from sort of like an upper class upbringing, she connects to Bruce because she feels like since he came from the lower class, like that he had more of a reason to feel depressed. Like she felt guilty about feeling depression while coming from a place of privilege. So it's I just thought that was interesting, and her writing on Bruce was very eloquent and beautiful. So I read the memoir, and that is what made me. I had heard Bruce before, but I hadn't really like dived into him. So PROZAC Nation really kind of like changed my life in that sense. The film adaptation, I will say, it doesn't build on the Bruce connection as well as it could have, but it's definitely still there. There's this really cool scene where she's listening to The Promise and on a record player, and she's like, she's depressed, she's high on drugs, and it's just, there's really cool like camera work, and the song just feels, it's such a like emotionally like kind of song. So it really works for the film. And it plays during that scene, and then another really like emotional scene, and it connects to her father and how her father essentially like abandoned her. So he let down those promises to be there for her. So the film uses the song The Promise in a very like emotional way. So what I discuss in the chapter is not only, how the song functions, but then also why the lead character, Elizabeth Wurtzel, why she related to Bruce, and why, and of course how Bruce relates to her. He, as we know from Born to Run, the release of his memoir, like he's dealt with a lot of depression and history with his family. He also had a troubled relationship with his father. So I think it's important that Bruce spoke out about having to deal with those issues. And I just thought it was an important film to include because I wanted to discuss, how Bruce has been open about his dealings with mental illness.
Definitely. Certainly it's an important topic. Definitely look forward to checking out the film. And, speaking of films with great emotional weight, we then come up with Reign Over Me as the next film that you cover in the book.
Yeah.
Which also covers some very emotional territory.
Yeah, Reign Over Me, great film, especially if you want to see Adam Sandler in a great dramatic role. He's incredible in this film. So he plays a widower whose entire family tragically passed away during the tragedy of 9/11. So the way Bruce's music functions in this film, the song Out in the Street, Adam Sandler's character like plays the drums and then his friend plays on the guitar. So they're singing the song and then it like transitions into the real song. And then also Drive All Night. So the way that the music functions in this film, I relate it to Mary's Place, because Mary's Place is all about friendship, how friendship and music are like can renew your spirit. And that's exactly what Adam Sandler's character needs. When he plays music with his friend, he feels alive again. He listens, but sometimes he listens to music like to a fault. Like when he's in therapy, he puts Drive All Night on and he like won't listen to the therapist. So in a sense, like music and pop culture helps heal him, but it also is like helping him to avoid his issues. I also discussed like where The Rising and then Reign Over Me fits within like pop culture's interpretation of 9/11. So particularly within how do I say this, with like Middle Eastern like figures. So Bruce is he shows you the other side. He's more empathetic. You have songs like Empty Sky and Worlds Apart. Like you're hearing the other perspective, and he's approaching it with compassion, and he's not villainizing anything. This sort of happens in Reign Over Me and in a lot of American cinema at the time. So post 9/11 culture is definitely something very interesting, and that's why Bruce's The Rising is so impactful, because you are truly you're hearing from all sides of the story, and we are all suffering and learning how to begin again, as he sings. So Reign Over Me is a very interesting and moving film that uses Bruce's music very well. And automatically, by using Bruce, you have to consider the thematic correlations between Bruce, The Rising, and just post 9/11 culture in general.
Right. Okay. Next up is The Wrestler, which I can't remember. Did Bruce did he get another nomination for the Academy Award for this, or just Golden Globe? I think, right?
Yes, he won the Golden Globe, and I feel like he wasn't even nominated.
Yeah, I think you're right
The
about
Wrestler. That. It was very upsetting.
But I think he'll survive.
Yeah, he'll be all right. But yeah, he definitely won the Globe. What I most wanted to get across for this chapter is why Bruce's song is so perfect for it. Like because he can relate to the character. He can relate to Randy. Like even like Randy's sort of like a bad alternate timeline Bruce. Like what if Bruce like made it big in the 80s and like completely just dropped off the face of the earth? Like Bruce can relate to Randy's need to be on the stage and to give his whole self to his art. I compare like wrestling and Bruce's, performing for singing music, and they're both, especially the way Bruce performs, so like physically demanding, and both characters they give their entire selves, their entire bodies and souls to doing what they love. I explore that like dichotomy between being on and off stage, and just having a passion. But the thing is, like Randy's character, he lets that get in the way of other things. He lets that get in the way of his family. And for Bruce, again, as we learn from his memoirs, he had to learn how to, he could still, be passionate about his music, but he also, life trumps art, as he says. So he wanted to have a real life as well, like a real life off stage. So that dichotomy I was very much interested in. And again, as I said, the idea of like the physical toll on the body, Bruce can relate to that. And also, as we know from Bruce's memoirs, it was coming out of a place of, in the past, it was coming out of a place of self-loathing. And Randy struggles with that as well. And that's what makes the song so beautiful, is that Bruce really understood the psychological motivations of Mickey Rourke's character. And the song, I see it functions in a way as like a tribute to his character, especially when you consider what happens at the end.
Definitely. And very, very powerful usage of Bruce's music. And once again, when asked to write a song or contribute an original song, I don't know, how far along he had already written something like this. That kind of happened with Philadelphia. He kind of had something written, I believe, about Kristen Ann Carr,
yes,
to whom he was very close. The daughter of Barbara Carr, his co-manager, and Dave Marsh, his de facto biographer before he wrote his own autobiography. Yeah. But I don't know how far along into the creation, if at all, he was of this song before he was approached.
Right.
In any case, the song that he wrote, or do you know?
I'm trying to remember. I know Mickey Rourke like personally asked him. I don't recall if they sent him just the script or a cut of the film. It was either one of those, and then he wrote it. I think he wrote it within a very short amount of time.
Yeah, and in any case, whether he changed it up a bit for the film, it seems like whenever he contributes an original song to a film, it's always in that first person.
Yeah.
Walk in the character's shoes perspective.
Yeah.
I think is an interesting. I don't know. Just
definitely.
The songs, yeah.
Definitely. And I think for all those films, like Dead Man Walking, The Wrestler, and Philadelphia, it's kinds of characters that you need that first person perspective to emotionally connect with them. Because like, Randy on the surface, like he's not I mean, he's terrible to his daughter. He has no one. Like, he's very much an isolated character. So you sort of need, and someone frankly kind of easy to maybe dislike. So you need that sort of emotional connection that Bruce brings through the first person perspective and through, putting you in their shoes to connect with the character and care about their journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree.
So now we're stepping back away from the silver screen and onto the television screen with Show Me a Hero, a great HBO miniseries based on a very interesting book.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce's music gets used pretty extensively throughout. It was a miniseries. I think it was maybe 4 parts.
I think it's 6.
Yeah, 6 parts. Okay.
Yeah.
But very well done. But yeah, tell us about Show Me a Hero and using Bruce's music.
Show Me a Hero is so good. I feel like, not a lot of people have seen it, and I want people to watch it. So that's mainly why I wrote about it also. It's just, it's just such an incredible, well done show. It just gets more poignant as time goes on. So it's essentially about affordable housing in Yonkers, New York. It's this young up-and-coming mayor, Nick Wasisco, and he gets elected, and he finds himself in the midst of this very bitter housing battle. The use of Springsteen music functions as a way, not as sort of like an emotional like standpoint for like, or for the series, because you're dealing with what could be like kind of dry material, because there's a lot of political jargon and things going on, with zoning and all kinds of stuff. But the Springsteen music sort of brings you back to the like emotional core of the story.
Yep.
So there's and it also, puts you within the time period because you're in the 80s and the 90s. But it mainly functions as sort of Nick's journey, like a little signpost for Nick's journey. So you have like songs like Cadillac Ranch. It plays when Nick finds out he gets elected. You have Valentine's Day. It plays, after Nick gets married, and all things like that. Lift Me Up is also in there in an absolutely just very emotional scene that I won't spoil. But, and it also these songs are included in montages that include the characters, the people of color that are also, on this emotional journey. All they want is a home, as Bruce sings in Hungry Heart. Everybody wants a home. They just want, to raise their families like everybody else. And Bruce's music connects them to Nick and therefore to everyone. And then of course, when you're using Bruce, what I write about is just this automatic thematic connection between the show's racial themes and how Bruce has approached race throughout his music. Show Me a Hero and Bruce Springsteen is telling a story of how we can have racial equality in America. And I mean, that's evident through so much of Bruce's work. And I pretty much extensively, dive into that, like, Bruce's land of hope and dreams credo. Like, that's pretty much what Show Me a Hero is. Yeah, it's an amazing show.
It is. It's very well filmed, very well acted.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Isaacs, lead role,
incredible,
amazing, and very relevant right now, especially. I
Yeah.
know it came out like maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's been a while,
Yeah.
but it hasn't lost
Yeah.
any of its relevance at all. And it is available to stream if you have HBO access. It remains available to stream there. Last but certainly not least is
Mhm.
American Honey, another film I have yet to see, but thanks to your book. This is one of the great things about Caroline's book. You will probably more than likely come across at least one film you're going to go, oh yeah, I want to see that. So yeah, tell us about American Honey, please.
Sure. I think it's on Netflix right now, so
Great.
that should be easy to check out. American Honey. So I wanted to pretty much do like American films, just because just because I wanted to contemplate how American film intersects with Bruce's own visions of America. So this is the only film that's by, it's actually a British filmmaker, but it was made in America. But I think it's interesting to have like an outsider's perspective. So American Honey does use a Springsteen cover, but Bruce toyed with it so much that I feel like it's his own song, and that's Dream Baby Dream. The film is about it's called a mag crew. So it's this young girl named Star, and she ran away from her foster home, and she hooks up with these kids in a van. They wander America and they sell magazines, and they're just trying to get by. And it's very much, there's a lot of Bruce elements to it. But so the scene of Dream Baby Dream is, it's very poignant in terms of it connects characters across, all lines of class and race and things like that. So it's sort of presenting this image of just everyday Americans wanting something more for themselves. And what's more Bruce Springsteen than that? So that scene, very significant. But then there's also the film itself. It's a road movie suffused with, the Western genres like mythology. And the road movie and Westerns are two of Bruce's like biggest film influences.
Mm-hmm.
So the characters themselves, they're like wanderers. They're wandering the country. They're alone. They're that, they're a modern day cowboy, essentially. They don't want to be tied down. They don't want, but yet they also sort of long for the structure of, finding a home, living with their loved ones, raising a family. So it's that interesting dichotomy that Bruce has been exploring his entire career. So I think that's why I wanted to include it. It's it's got, its images are they bring to mind a lot of Bruce's music. It's just these wide shots of the beauty of the country. And it just brings to mind a lot of, Bruce's fascination with the landscapes of America. And yeah, just the beauty of his country. Oh, and lastly, it's set, in post 2008 economic crisis. So it's also contemplating those, wrecking ball ideas of what it's like to live in America now that is so, the class divisions are just so wide. So it's contemplating, living in a capitalistic society and things like that. So there's a lot of, Bruce-esque themes in it that makes it a very interesting watch. And I highly recommend it.
And it's probably the most recently released film in the book, right? Isn't it only?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I think it's from 2016. Okay. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a way to end the book in a way, because it's, at the time at least, as you were reading the book. It was one of the more recently released films with Springsteen music. Since that time, of course, we've had a few additional
quite a few,
including one directed by the man himself, or co-directed, his first foray into filmmaking. So your book could be more timely in that sense, because Bruce definitely continues to be a major force in film now as well as music, and it's going to be interesting to see how that continues over time. Well, Caroline, I want to thank you so much for doing this. Again, I think this is a great book, and I'm really happy to help put another spotlight on it. I highly encourage people to get it through Backstreets. We're going to put up on screen now how you can go about doing that. And McFarland is an academic publisher, so it's got like a textbook kind of price, but in my view, it's well worth it, because this is not your standard like textbook read by any means. It's very insightful and also very entertaining. If you're a Springsteen fan who's into movies and how Bruce's music has been used in the movies over the years, you're going to love this book. So check it out. Try to see these films. I know I'll be hunkered down trying to see the ones I haven't seen, and even rewatch the ones I have with some new insights, thanks to your book. So
thank you.
Let's check it out, folks. And I want to encourage everyone, as the man himself says in his radio shows, stay safe, stay smart, stay healthy, mask up, and as he sings in Backstreets, remember all the movies. Take care.
Thanks.